Why We Are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and today we're going to be interviewing a man that drove all the way over from Livermore, California, Harry Briley. Hello, Harry.
Hello, Kent.
How are you doing, guy?
It was an easy trip over.
Was it?
Yep. No traffic.
When I got here, you were up visiting the San Rafael Mission.
I have a passion for that.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah. Did we ever meet before?
Nope.
We never met before.
Not at all.
How did you get a hold of me?
There was a Presbyterian church in Walnut Creek that had the living art displays. And during the intermission, I found your book in the bookstore, purchased it because you wrote about the Jesus movement, and I had not seen one like that before. I said,
That's the Awakenings in America.
Yes.
Right. Okay, good. So that put us in touch, Harry.
I said, he's local. I better, I'm going to email you. And you responded, and so here we are.
Well, great. Now, I noticed that you were born in Los Angeles.
Yes.
In Arcadia?
No. It was Woodland Hills, Van Nuys area.
Okay, Woodland Hills.
Yep.
My first girlfriend lived in Woodland Hills.
All right. And my folks attended a Presbyterian church in Arcadia, and that's where Arcadia came from.
A little bit about your parents. Where are your parents from?
Both of my parents are from Michigan.
Okay.
My mom was an orphan at 18. Her parents died, and so she had a cousin, an older cousin, who was an artist, and took her under her wing. And she followed her cousin out to Arcadia. So that's how she got to Arcadia. And then my dad was in Upper Michigan, joined the Navy, and had read some books, one of which was by Billy Graham, much to my surprise, because he never mentioned it to me. And then when he was discharged from the Navy, wanted to see what he could do, so he wound out, made his way to Los Angeles, worked for McDonnell Douglas briefly, hated it, and became a dairy and egg man, delivering dairy goods in Woodland Hills.
Really? Well, good old San Fernando Valley.
And the girls were at Arcadia, and that's how he met my wife.
All right.
Met my mother.
You met your mother, okay.
Yeah.
So how old are you now?
I am 65 now.
You're 65, and you just told me you retired after 37 years at Lawrence Livermore Lab in Livermore.
That's correct.
What were you doing there?
I was designing databases for both the administrative side of the house and scientists who needed to keep track of things, and I would design the data structures to track those things.
Okay.
And I can't tell you any more.
I understand. There's a lot of stuff goes on at that lab.
I grew up and down the coast.
Oh, you did?
So I was in Oregon and California and Hawaii.
And Hawaii?
And then went to college in New Mexico.
What college?
New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology.
Really?
It was kind of like the Caltech or the MIT of New Mexico. We were also called School of Mines, and so our competitor was Colorado School of Mines up in Golden.
Okay.
So that was the tribe that I ran around with.
Okay. So what was your life goal at that point?
I wanted to do something with computers.
Okay. That was it.
That was it. I had no clue until I was pretty much in my junior year and doing poorly in my classwork because I didn't know what I was going to do with all this information they were teaching me, and then became and also I got tired of writing software for nuclear shear on helicopter blades, and because they never reached a conclusion. And so I moved into administrative software for the college, and I found my calling. I said, I can write stuff, and it's finished, and it actually does stuff. And so that was my appeal.
Okay. And so now you went to high school where?
In Simi Valley.
Simi Valley?
Near Los Angeles.
Yes, I know Simi Valley.
Okay.
Used to go hunting there.
There were just onion fields there. Okay.
Oh, yes. I remember the fields. That was before they made it a big suburban area.
That's when we arrived in 1969,
Yeah.
was there in,
Yeah.
in the suburbia.
I'm talking about the 1950s. We would go there,
Oh,
and it was just land. It was just.
yeah, it was just fields, agriculture.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. Did you do any sports in high school?
No, I was averse to sports. So I joined the marching band and found my calling, because then I didn't need to do any of the gymnastics and things, but they just marched our rears off and we passed our what's the word, physical fitness test for the state.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow. So that was fun.
it was enjoyable.
Yeah, great. Now, were your parents interested in, did they go to church or anything?
That was I grew up in a completely secular home. So when I became a believer, I wanted to see if there was anyone else in our family, and I would search and search. So finally I started writing my memoirs to do that kind of questioning. And I discovered, much to my surprise, that both my mom and my dad attended this Presbyterian church in Arcadia. And my mom was the editor for that college-age newspaper, kind of amateurish, put it together. And one of her articles, she reported that Bill and Vonette Bright from Campus Crusade came out and had a deputation presentation, and they each gave their testimony. And apparently both my mom and dad thought very highly of it. And then my dad went to a semester or two at UCLA and apparently had some sort of run-in with Bill Bright. I didn't find out about this until decades later. And also found some liberalism in the church that he was attending, where the pastor didn't believe in a heaven or a hell, and not much of anything else, as from what I could drag out of him. And at that point, he just the door was shut. And he was hostile to organized religion thereafter. I was
against organized religion.
Against organized religion. So I was maybe 2-3 years old. So this is outside of my span of knowledge. I have no memory of that. It's just from my research.
Okay. So you weren't going to any kind of churches really at all during that period?
Not at all.
Did you have any kind of God concept at all?
None.
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 Okay. You're interested in the sciences.
Yes.
This was your area. I know those kind of guys. You were the nerd.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
The geeks. Yes. I had my share of colored pens in my pocket. I had my slide rule hanging off my belt. Yes.
I remember the guys with the slide rules.
And the black rim glasses
The black.
with the middle taped together because they broke.
You were the poster boy.
Yes, and I'm sure I had a paperclip holding the stem on because the screw was lost. Yes, definitely a geek. Yes.
All right, Harry. That's wonderful. So, how is it, now can you see any of signs how it is that you began to have an interest in Jesus at all?
The earliest that I can remember was when I was 9, and my father enjoyed watching The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits. And
I love The Twilight Zone.
well, he was an addict to those TV shows, and it was the surest way to get me to go up to bed, because as soon as the opening music would come in, boom, I'm upstairs to bed. It's like, I just did not like those shows. And it was, I had a radio, a little clock radio in my room. And as long as it was quiet, I could play it until I fell asleep. And it happened during that time that Billy Graham had a program called The Hour of Decision with George Beverly Shea singing.
Yes.
Yeah, right, with a deep bass voice. Yeah, so anyhow.
And Cliff Barrows.
Cliff Barrows directing the Crusade Choir, yes. And boy, that brings back memories. And so it was there that I had the first inkling of a concept that there was a God and that he loved me. And at that point, Jesus had became my friend. I had no concept of a Savior, but I understood that basic amount at age 9.
So the hour of decision, you heard Billy Graham, you began to have some idea that there was somebody named Jesus.
Right.
And was there any content?
And somehow he was connected to God.
Somehow connected to God, okay. And you're 9 years old at this point.
Right.
What happened next?
Well, then I would go, we had a 120-acre farm up in Oregon at that time, and I would just go out in the hills far away from where there was no one else could hear me, and I would just sing to the Lord, much like David, I imagine David did while he was shepherding sheep. And it was just as close and personal as we are here today. And it was just an awesome, close friendship. I, once again, had no concept that he was my Savior. I just understood that he loved me, and I was responding.
That is something I've never heard before.
And my parents had no clue what I was doing as long as I was home by dinner.
Okay.
It was a farm.
It was a farm. Okay. So what, did this carry over in your high school days?
No. In upper elementary, we moved into town, which would have been Eugene, Oregon at that time, and it was a suburb. And that closeness with Jesus started to fade away. There was too many other things to attract me. And then lots of moves, different cities, back to Eugene, back to Hawaii, back to Eugene, back to Newport Beach, back to Eugene, and finally wound up in Simi Valley in Southern California. And that was when I started sensing, and I can't tell you how it happened, except that I started sensing that there was a gap between me and God. And I couldn't shake that feeling, and I didn't know what to do about it.
Huh. So you're in your teens at this point?
I would have been probably 15.
15.
Yep.
Were there many Christians going to that high school?
None that I knew of.
Did anybody ever come up and tell you about Jesus?
No.
No?
No, didn't attend church, so.
Your parents weren't going to church?
Nope.
So here you are. How is it then that you moved on from that?
Well, I was indeed struggling with this idea of a separation, and I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know really a good concept of sin. All I knew is that I had this gap, and I wanted what I had back as a 9-year-old. And so I thought, I've got it. I'm going to read the Bible. It's got to be God and the Bible. They got to be connected somehow. So I got my hands on a Bible, and I didn't get any blowback from my parents about this. The fact that I was
reading. They knew you were reading the Bible?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I presume they did, because it was in a family not much is hidden from parents. But
were you an only child?
No, I was one of 3.
One of 3?
2 other brothers.
Where were you in the?
I was the top.
You were the oldest.
Right.
Okay.
So the compliant, responsible one.
Okay.
Yep. So I started as what many people do. You start in the Bible and you start at page 1. So I started in Genesis, and I worked my way through Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, and was plowing my way halfway through Deuteronomy, and I was feeling more and more miserable, because I saw that for the first time in my life that there's a holy God, and I was not measuring up.
And you were not holy.
And I was definitely not holy.
At 15, you're not holy. No.
Yeah, 15, but it's this vague feeling of separation, and so you can't say, well, what specific sins were you doing? And it's like, I don't know, I have the separation. I have no idea how to fix it, right? If it was a specific thing, then I can, I have something to fix. But there was nothing I could do about it. And At that time, my dad was in the stock market, and this is and farm real estate. So that's how we kept moving all the time. And so he lost his a shirt.
He lost his shirt.
He probably lost many shirts on commodity futures. There was a big rainstorm, ruined the crop, and he was highly leveraged and lost everything.
Oh my.
And so that humbled him enough for his sister to recommend him that he attended prayer and share service on Thursdays. He had become a truck driver at that time, shuttling stuff around the Los Angeles basin. And so during his Thursday runs, he would drop in there. And he found something really fascinating. So this would be like February. So it was still relatively new to him. I think he must have known that I was interested in the Bible, but he wasn't sure. So he said, would you be willing to go with me to this prayer and share time?
Now, what is the prayer and share, and where is this at now?
This would have been down in what later became Melody Land Christian Center.
Melody Land in Anaheim.
Right, but I think they were called Redwood Chapel or something, some benign name like that. They were not yet Melody Land. They had bought the property. They haven't moved. So I shocked him because I said yes. I pretty jumped out of my seat saying, yeah, of course. And I count that enthusiasm not because I was really, really wanting to go, but because I figured this is my only chance to get some answers. So it was more of the sense of desperation that made me say, yes! So we drove down there. It was an hour and a half or so across the LA basin. And nothing happened, according to my father. There was no fireworks or healings or special...
He wanted big stuff.
He wanted me to see magic or whatever, you know.
And had he seen that stuff?
Apparently he had. And he wanted to show it off. And nothing happened. And so he was sorely disappointed. But, remember, this is my first time in church.
Okay.
I didn't know how church operated. And there was this young girl about my age who went up to the open microphone and she wanted to praise the Lord because God had allowed her to get as far as Romans chapter 10.
You mean she read up to that point?
That's what I thought. I was in shell shock because I was still stuck in Deuteronomy. And I had presumed that she had read all the way from Genesis all the way through Romans 10. So I'm deeply impressed. I later put pieces together and realized she had only read 10 chapters.
Okay.
But God had found his mark and said, this is, and really impressed me. And somewhere in the middle of that, there was a call for baptisms that would occur that evening, that Thursday evening. So I don't remember hearing it, but I remember on the trip going back to Simi Valley, I asked my dad, I didn't ask, I simply stated, I said, I want to be baptized. And mumble, 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 you know, he was just kind of like, well, we'll see about that. Not very enthusiastic, so I figured, okay, it's not going to happen.
So now, let me make sense of this here.
Okay.
So you hear about this baptism, you want to be baptized, you think that's going to be the fix? This is going to put you over the top?
It was something that I said, if this is what I need to do to get close to God, then this is what I need to do.
Okay. Okay.
Because
so you really didn't understand fully what baptism was. It's just that you were looking for something.
I was looking for something to grab hold of, yes.
Okay.
And whatever.
Well, did you get baptized?
I was not sure if my dad was going to make the trip. This is now an hour and a half down, an hour and a half back, an hour and a half back down. So he was talking about 6 hours of driving that day. And he just hemmed and hawed all day and then said, yeah, let's do it. And so I'm totally clueless. I'm in the back seat. We drive down and are introduced to the pastor who's going to do the baptisms, and we're trooped off to a changing room where I hear the gospel really for the first time.
Okay, now. All right, now we're putting this together. Okay, so Harry, so you're at the church.
Yes.
They're getting ready to baptize you, and they're going to explain what it's all about.
Yes.
Now,
this is more of like, just in case you hadn't heard it yet.
just in case, okay, want to make sure we don't baptize any unconverted people.
That's right.
That's what they were aiming at.
They didn't want us to come up as wet sinners.
Okay. Now, is your dad a Christian at this point?
No, he still has this lingering hostility, and then he is giving God a second chance.
He's giving God a second chance. He's wondering.
He's got maybe this is like a 1 month window, and then he maybe 2 months. February, March, maybe until April, and then he turns sour again.
He did?
Yes.
Did he ever become a believer in Jesus?
He started reading the Bible on his own and was convinced that he was the only Christian because everyone else was wrong, and he couldn't. And he had a very a rough understanding of the Bible. So he would read things into it and would compare what other people were saying, and it was like he was emphasizing on how wrong they were, and
sort of a one-man cult.
Very much so, yes. So that's the kind of environment I grew up in.
Okay.
So you didn't talk about faith at home because you knew that there was whatever you said or whatever I said would be a landmine, and so I learned how to walk on eggshells.
So back to the day, that night that you're at that church,
Right.
They're explaining
Yes.
a gospel message.
Now, we use the word gospel, and I know that's an old, archaic term, but essentially we're explaining how that who Jesus was, that he was God's answer for our sin, that he died on the cross because of those sins, and he rose for our forgiveness from the grave on the third day. In essence, that is the good news, is that we have salvation through that resurrection. No resurrection, we'd have a dead Messiah. No cross, you wouldn't have the Lamb of God image from the Old Testament. That wouldn't have been there. So you had to have both the cross and the resurrection, and that was presented. And then they led us in a very simple 30-second prayer of asking Jesus to be welcome him into our life.
Okay. You mark that as your conversion experience?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So what was going on when I was age 9? I just have to say it was God pulling on strings.
Slowly bringing you in.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard similar testimonies, Harry, and that I remember Vacation Bible School, Portland, Oregon, Portland Boulevard and 6th to Mrs. Barlow, and the flannel graph, and you go from a black heart to a red heart to a white heart.
I never saw any of that.
You never did?
I never heard about Gideon or any of the heroes or Noah. I had no clue. I only read those as an adult later, so I read them in an adult context.
Sure.
So kids who grew up in church said, well, you know about Gideon, don't you? No. How about Samson? No. Because I stopped at Deuteronomy and I didn't finish reading the rest of the Old Testament.
All right, Harry. So you were 15 at that point?
I was 16 at that point.
16. And you're probably a sophomore or junior in high school?
Right. So I was in the middle of my junior year. Yes.
Okay. So then you become a Christian. What happened then?
Well, I wanted to say something about the baptism. Is that
okay?
Can I do that?
Sure.
Okay. When they baptized me, I was already a Red Cross junior lifeguard student. I had my card that said, see, Red Cross swimming. So water didn't bother me.
Swimming.
I figured I was just going to get wet. When I came up out of the water, so it was an immersion baptized.
Real baptism.
Real baptism, yes, yes. Well, in New Mexico, we throw you in a snowbank and call it an immersion. But anyhow, when I came up out of the water, I felt this tremendous weight physically being lifted off my shoulders. And I felt like I was floating up out of the water and kind of careening down the hallway to the dressing room. Obviously, I wasn't floating, but that sense of just not quite, gravity was not strong at that moment. I just had that feeling. And in asking other people, they don't have that similar experience. And I had to believe that God gave me that physical sensation to steel me up for how to later respond with my father, who was hostile. So I needed something physical to hang on to.
Did you say anything to your dad on the way home about what happened?
I was kind of in my own world. I don't think I even said much of anything. You know, I was a teenager.
Yes.
How did it feel? Fine.
Now, what happened after that? Was there any significant change? Did you you probably didn't keep going back to that church?
No, it was clear across the county.
Sure.
So, but I found this sense of total forgiveness that I had been seeking for since age 15. And when I had come up out of that water, I knew that I had been forgiven. I would tell other people, I said, it felt like being a dirty old pail with the insides being washed out with a fire hose. Blam, you know. It was that, the transition was that amazing. So I was still in a total awe. And at that baptism, that evening, my cousin was there, and his mother, which was my father's sister. And I found out that both my cousin and my aunt had been praying both for my father and for me all along. I found out about that much, much later.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, now that's that element, Harry, that you had these two people that cared and were praying for you. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to pick up some more. There's a lot more to go, Harry.
Okay.
A lot more to go, and we'll be getting to that in the next program. So you've been watching Why We're Christians, and we're going to be looking at part 2 with Harry Briley coming up. So long.